Hello and welcome to another edition of Renew Wales in Conversation. This one is all about the creative arts and climate change. Can the three of you introduce yourselves briefly, please?
Hello, Shemai. I'm Deb Winter. I work as a performance storyteller. My background is volunteering community sector, project manager, some environmental projects, and I got recruited to work as a mentor for Renew Wales because I told a story about the rainforests burning, and somebody saw it, and I was asked to do the story again at a conference for Renew Wales. So that's basically how I joined up. So anyway, that's enough. Performance storyteller. And I'll hand over to a next person. Salome, is it?
Great. Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Salome Wagaine, and I am Programme Manager at Season for Change, which is a programme which is about cultural responses to the climate crisis. Originally, it was supposed to be in response to COP26 in Glasgow last November, but 2020 had other plans, as I'm sure we can get into. And it's me.
Shemai, hiya, I'm Geinor Styles and I'm the Artistic Director of Theatr Na'nog and we're based in Neath, and we produce theatre for young people in both Welsh and the English language.
Lovely. Well, we could probably fill several hours. We've only got half. But the question we're looking at, to starting with, is what has the creative sector got to offer the climate crisis, the nature crisis? What special contribution have we got to offer as the creative sector? So I don't know if either of you want to jump in. One of you wants to jump in on that. Maybe to
Shall I go?
Your particular organisation. Yeah.
Well, I think it's really interesting, isn't it? Because we tell stories, and I think this is probably the most important story to be told and to be communicated beyond our audiences. So it's to reach out to as many people as possible. But I think what I find fascinating about the subject matter at the moment is the emergency of it all, and that it is really, because we work a lot with young people, how we get that story to them, and then for them to tell the other generations within their families how important it is, because it's a change of mindset, I think, is needed. But I've absolutely loved trying to tell that story, because it's such a massive issue, but in a way that people can actually relate to, and the impact that we have here in Wales on right across the globe. I think it's important that we get that message across as well. So it's in a really strange way, it's a gift of a theme to tell that story, because it's where theatre's strengths are, is this: we can go from one place to another to show those things, and especially abstract forms of theories and things, which I find absolutely fascinating, especially as somebody who doesn't understand science. So because I was terrible at science in school, but I think this is where I can relate those themes and those theories in a way that is accessible to a big audience. So that's my thoughts at the moment. Yeah,
that makes perfect.
I have to agree. I think so. As part of my job with Season for Change, we've been doing these talk series, and last week we finished, and it was a topic called New Narratives, and it's all about the fact that fact-checking and pointing out what's wrong in people's arguments doesn't inspire in the same way as sharing a story, putting forward something positive that might make you understand your place in a bigger society, someone who can affect someone who can change someone's mind, improve, worsen the state of someone's life. And I'm really interested in all the different ways that can be done. And the wonderful thing about the arts is that it can be done in a narrative way. It can be done through visuals. It can be done through so many different things. And I think, it cuts through.
We've both we all seem to agree the importance of stories. And I think, both of you mentioned about, there's a lot of abstract arguments and facts and statistics. It's really hard. And it feels to me that telling stories, whether it's theatre, film, creative, where it's felt to me it's a really important role to move people. It's been a truth we've all lived with, that we don't lack the ability, we don't lack the resources, but we lack the will. And I don't know if you agree, but I feel like the role of the arts is to inspire and to move to people to actually want to change. Has that been your experience? Geinor?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think it has, and I think I'm always, I don't know why I'm surprised, but I'm always surprised at its power, the power of theatre. It's like it can never, ever be underestimated. And I think, a production that we did, which I suppose is like my climate change production, I suppose, was never about doing a show about climate change. It was about inspiring young girls to continue with their science education. So how do I do that? And that you come up with like this random idea of a young girl, a young carer then, that wants to, she invents an artificial tornado for renewable energy. Now, that was just a random idea that I had. I then Google it and find out that somebody's actually invented that. And then I go on this journey of emailing this scientist in Quebec, Louis Michaud, and I say, look, can I use your invention as part of this story? And he's like, absolutely, because that's the only way we can communicate, this desire to create renewable energy for young people. So he has been, and it was only actually, I know this is really ridiculous, but so did this story. And then he said, you have created a climate change musical. And I was like, oh, yeah, I have. But that wasn't the intention. The intention was to inspire young people to have a belief in themselves. The byproduct is this amazing invention that basically, okay, perhaps there will be a child in that audience that sees that show and thinks of, okay, so renewable energy is something that we all need to be trying to solve. We need to stop using, we need to get to zero carbon. So it's just a springboard for them. And I think whatever we can do, in whichever way we do it, it's so necessary now. It is the vital thing that we need to change. And I think the thing comes back to the communication of the science. And that's all storytellers are, really.
But what sounds really valuable in that, and why it's probably been so successful, is you're looking at someone's life in the round, aren't you? You're looking at the aspirations of the girl, the family, the situation, maybe the sexism that holds her back. There's a kind of, and that's the richness of theatre and story and film. We're not just, it's setting climate change in the context of somebody's life and their relationships, their emotions, their aspirations. Salome, I picked that up from some of the projects you've been involved with. Have you got thoughts around that, looking at it in the round?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is thinking about, so one of the projects we supported is a Roma artist, Rosa Cisneros, and she's been doing a project it's called Roma Reuse Recycle. Oh, there's a third RE and this afternoon it's gone. But it's working with young families, and they've been given these like recycling packs, and through those workshops they together have made a picture book. So it's this incredible thing around, often if you're a school child, I remember going to we had a recycling plant trip, and that was the way that as a household we started recycling, was that we kind of heard about it through the kids. So that project was really exciting. And now, if I go back to my mum, she always recycles. It just is part of how we do. But there has to be that first point, and it's lovely to have that as an activity, especially this year. I'm just thinking so much about how parents have had to all of a sudden have to be homeschooling and all the rest of it. And so that moment of sharing something, having an activity, and then having this wonderful thing of like, oh, it's a picture book that we've helped make. And I think that's been really lovely to think about, is that there've been lots of children in different pockets of the country who've been like, oh, I've helped with this, you know. And I think that is something as well, and the parents will feel that as well. Like, I think that you know, it doesn't have just to be children and adults, of course. It could be amongst other groups, but that example is kind of like makes me feel very excited.
It sounds like both of you are sort of cascading the knowledge, the awareness, the ideas through the generations, through families, different backgrounds. I mean, do you feel that you've been able to reach audiences that? So I sometimes feel when a lot of the stories I tell, I'm telling to the converted already. If I tell a story about the environmental crisis, I'm telling it to other people with a green agenda. I'd be interested to know if you feel you're reaching people who maybe wouldn't have heard the message the other way, but through the creative arts, through theatre or film, you've been able to bring in people who perhaps might not have heard the message otherwise.
Yeah, I think so, definitely with our production Eye of the Storm, but I think it started for me much earlier, whereas I've sort of got the reverse situation where I create theatre, or we were creating theatre for theatre audiences. So and this is where I sort of got involved in looking at science and what's the richness of science and what needs to be communicated, was when we did a project about Alfred Russel Wallace. Well, what we found that with that character, with that person, that sort of amazing scientist, was that people who didn't go to the theatre was coming to see the show about this man. So all of a sudden there was a wealth of audiences where theatre could hook them into those massive theories and ideas. So in a way, it's working in a different. So I can see what the power of theatre is beyond theatre audiences. So that story can be told, those, like what I was saying earlier, you know, those abstract ideas can be told and shared right across the boards. And it's just going back to, it's just the power of story, isn't it? And if you can get something that they can relate to, that they can find a way in, then you're away, really. You can share anything with them then. So I think it's a reverse for us, really, because I remember us doing the show about Alfred Russel Wallace in a museum in Cardiff, and we were just basically the character was just walking around the museum, and somebody came in and said, I just came in to see about the porcelain gallery, but I got transfixed by this Victorian gent walking along, talking to me about the theory of evolution. So it was like, yes, this is how we capture them, you know. And so it felt like it was a very magical moment, extremely magical, I think, for me, because it just opened my world then beyond theatre, beyond drama.
I think sometimes there is a bit of a challenge in terms of not just preaching to the converted, but and obviously I don't want to try and turn a pandemic purely into a positive, like, opportunity sense, but I think over the last year there have been certain things that in people's day-to-day lives have almost shown that these things aren't just for one sort of person. You know, you don't have to be someone who protests every single week to have an opinion on the air quality in your area, or how much public space have I got? Am I free to roam? Am I, you know, all of those sorts of things. And I think from there, you then can tie into something else. But I think something that's been really helpful for me, and I count myself as a bit of a climate novice, I joined this job like last March, is that thing about climate justice, and that really being tied into people's day-to-day human rights in their lives. And through that, I've found talking about climate crisis, natural world, the environment, much easier and a bit more tangible. So there is a bit of a challenge, but I think our day-to-day lives can show us and give us inspiration for art.
But when I had a little look at what Season for Change are up to, and I was really excited by some of these cross art form commissions. Is that, I mean, some of them just sounded as if they're, as you say, bringing so many different themes together. The fact that you had someone who was a biologist, artist, educator and drag queen from the Amazon region. I'm thinking that is amazing. Is that something you've been involved with, the cross art form works? Salome, is that?
Yeah, I think some of it has been really organic. So some of it has been really organic in terms of we've got this open program, and so you can list your event on the website, and we'll upload it, and it's amazing to see the sort of range of things that are happening locally, nationally, sometimes internationally, but mainly nationally. And I think it's meeting people where they're at. So that could be an online talk, but that also could be I don't know, a sort of cabaret performance, or it could be something completely different. And every time I'm uploading events and sort of clicking approve, I'm just like, people's experiences are so varied. It's always just, it feels like a real privilege, to be honest. And even hearing about like a climate change musical that wasn't intending to, I'm like, I want to see it. So I think it has been intentional in terms of just wanting to cast the net wide.
Do you think, I mean, I don't know how unusual you both are in doing so much work around the climate change crisis, and you'll be much more plugged into the world of sort of theatre and film than I am. I mean, we all agreed we've got a very special role to play, the creative sector, but thinking about the future, what more do you think needs to be done, or what else could we offer, could we contribute? Any thoughts about, your own particular programs or other work you're aware of in the creative field?
It's interesting at the moment. We're it feels as if it's like it's urgent. We have to, we have no time. That's the thing that I feel a little bit. Perhaps we should be doing stuff immediately about this. We were really lucky. We took one of our shows to Indonesia, to Makassar, and it was so interesting being there because we were actually seeing climate change happening right in front of our eyes. We were invited to go snorkeling, and we were going to go snorkeling, so we borrowed a boat from this family, and we went to the family's island, which is really like, at sea level, and they were building a wall to keep the sea out. As we're out there doing a show about Alfred Russel Wallace, who was, one of the co-discoverer of the theory of evolution, and you're thinking, this story here that is being seen by children in Makassar, we need to tell them this story about this family who are building the wall to keep the sea out to children in Neath. They need to understand that the plastic that they are not recycling and the effect that they are having. But it's not, I think as well, it's easy for us to sort of change children's minds, I think, and to influence them. But they need to be the influencers. They need to be the ones that are growing up and influencing governments. And it's how we give them those tools and the confidence to do that. That I think is an ongoing thing, but we haven't got time. We really haven't got time. So it's empowering young people to find their voice and to use their voice for the good of us all. So that's what my feelings are on it at the moment.
That's such a powerful story, just the way you tell it, just like that. They're building the wall while you're there telling the story.
Yeah, it was really. It really struck both me and the actor that was out there with us. We were depressed for about a couple of days because we just didn't. We felt so helpless. But we're all part of it. We're all responsible, and we've all got. So it's just how do we change governments, basically? How do we get them to understand? It is that important. But I think young people who will become the people who vote these people in, that's where the power is, and it's empowering them to have that voice.
I mean, young people seem to be leading on it before the pandemic, rather paid to mass demonstrations, but we're very, very inspired to see that.
Yeah.
Salome, is there anything you wanted to, thinking about the future, what you'd like to see?
I think for me, it's also about getting better at having conversations with people who we don't necessarily always agree with. I've got some really affirmed climate skeptics, deniers, etc. in my family, and I felt as though that was quite a handy route in for this role, because in a sense you then can't ever it's possible still, but it makes it a bit harder to turn those arguments or those worries about, I don't know, isn't it very convenient that the second that, I don't know, the West has had its chance to develop, other people can't? Like, it's quite a confronting question, and so it's this thing around, okay, well, what is the thing that sits at the bottom of that? And really, it's trying to ensure that people across the world have a fair chance at, ensuring decent lives to their families. And I don't think that overconsumption of things and like fast fashion, which is really new, is a way to help that, actually. But it's about starting from there, and also just thinking about how isolated some people have been this year, across different ages, classes, backgrounds, whatever, and therefore, what are the activities that artists and companies can do to bring people together to start having those conversations, even if the main topic isn't necessarily about climate. It's just it's that thing about I know that you've been talking about those walls being built up, but I'm trying to think about ways that those barriers between people are less, and I think that is a role that like artists and maybe even just sitting in a room with people watching something, like going to the cinema, like that really helps.
Yeah, it's interesting, saying about broadening the conversation and broadening the audience for that conversation. I think we've got a production that we've been developing, which is, again, nothing to do with climate change. However, it's a story about Operation Julie, which was the drugs bust that happened in Tregaron in West Wales. Now, you wouldn't have Operation Julie without that chemist who created the purest form of LSD, Richard Kemp. And he wrote a thesis before the court case. And that thesis, which was written in 1977, is so prophetic about, the need of a revolution in people's minds, the spark to put the world on the road to some sort of survival of recovery. He was... he recognized that we were just consuming and consuming and consuming. And I think this musical is a prog rock musical about that time. It's like The Good Life meets Breaking Bad. That's basically what it is. So there will be a general audience seeing this, but that speech, that thesis, those prophetic words will be told. And it's to make people sort of sit back and question how they live their lives. We cannot keep taking from this planet. It's just unsustainable, and we need to recognize that. And if I can do it through a prog rock musical that's like a free festival on stage, then that's what I'll do.
It sounds a very popular and successful route to me.
Yeah.
You've sold it to us. Oh, lovely. Oh, I'm where we're probably creeping up towards our time. Is there anything that you're burning to add about something about the special role that the arts in particular can play in hastening things, as you say, Geinor. There's an urgency here. What can we all do, and what can we all do faster? Oh.
I think media has a role to play. You know, we are working with in schools in Neath, Talbot, Bridgend, Swansea, those areas. You know, we get very little kudos, very little press attention. It's about that. It's about them recognising that the work that is being done with teachers and in schools. I think the new curriculum in Wales, which is a creative curriculum coming in 2022, that's going to open up massive amounts, because instead of subjects, it's going to be looking at themes, and the themes, you know, climate change and the Future Generations Act and all those things are all connected. And I think, you know, that's where the power is going to lie, really, for us to change things and to make it a huge priority for future generations.
There's a real thirst for positive news as well, isn't there? Talking to teachers and youth workers, saying that, you know, people can be paralysed by fear and despair, but actually toolkits, actions are empowering.
Yeah.
And there's I know through Renew Wales, I mean, I became aware of so many more projects than I'd realised were out there. I think the more publicity, the media is so important, because there's a thousand wonderful changes happening, which just, when did we last hear them on mainstream media?
Yeah, exactly.
So we've got to do it, and we've got to shout about it, and then we've got to get the press to come and cover us shouting about it. Oh,
but I think this is why this podcast has been so, you know, lovely, and, you know, to do, really, because we're having an opportunity, you know, to speak and to share our experiences as well. So I think it's a start, isn't it? You know, so I'm really glad I was able to, you know, to be invited along to do this. So thank you.
Oh no, it's been wonderful hearing about both your projects, and I hopefully arts and action together. I've told a story about the plastic pollution in Bristol, and lots of people cried, but then they signed an anti-plastic pledge. We locked them in until they'd gone. So there we are. That's just, it's been absolutely lovely to hear from both of you. I feel inspired, I feel encouraged, and hopefully people who listen will too. And thanks to Renew Wales for making it happen. Diolch, hwyl, bye.
Diolch yn fawr.